I choose that 4-stage model: cue, craving, response, reward. There's a lot of science behind it. 3 of those 4 stages are very common: cue, response, and reward. Started in like the early 1900s, but 1930s it got popularized with B.F. Skinner, which his model was stimulus, response, reward. And then Charles Duhigg's book, Power of Habit, has kind of brought it back to the forefront: cue, routine, reward, basically the same thing, just different words. And the idea, and there's 100 years of behavioral psychology research behind this, that if you show someone the right cue and they take an action and then you follow it with a reward, you can train them to do that thing whenever the cue arises again, whenever the stimulus happens. So if whenever the light in the lab turns on, the monkey gets a squirt of juice, then it knows whenever the light is on, I should go over and put my mouth underneath the nozzle to get some juice or whatever. And you can do that for all kinds of things. And it works for human behavior as well in many ways. But then there was this second wave of research with cognitive psychology over the last probably 50 to 75 years that shows that not only do external cues and external rewards influence our habits, but also internal moods, emotions, feelings, thoughts, beliefs, those influence our behaviors too. And so that's why I added that 4th stage of craving. And I think actually it's really important because it answers, I just had a couple like basic questions that I thought when I was dealing with this kind of breaking habits down and why should they be organized in a particular way? How do we understand them? And one of the questions is, well, if it's cue, response, reward, how come people have different responses to the same cue? There has to be something going on there. So you have 2 people that walk into a room and there's a pack of cigarettes on the counter. And one person sees it and they feel this craving to smoke and pull a cigarette out. And the other person has never smoked a day in their life and they see that same visual cue, but they think, oh, it's just a pack of cigarettes, and they move on. And what happens, and the key for that craving stage, is that it's really about the prediction or the meaning that you assign to the cue that determines whether you get a craving or not. So it comes back to that internal moods, states, emotions, feelings. And so...
Interesting you bring that up because there's a book called Alan Carr's Easy Way to Stop Smoking.
Yep.
He's now dead. But I read this 20 years ago or something, and it actually worked. And it was weird how what you're saying now is the pack of cigarettes used to cue, okay, I got to smoke. And then after reading a book like that, it cued, I'm not going to poison myself anymore, and I understand the trick it's playing on me. So, I mean, this is kind of...
You're like probably the 4th or 5th person that's told me about that book now.
Really?
Yeah, and so I think this is actually quite hard to do for breaking bad habits, which is rewiring the story in your brain for what a cue means.
Yeah.
But in the long run, that is actually, I think, a very robust way to break a bad habit, is to learn to teach yourself that cue means something new. Say you walk downstairs and you see a loaf of bread on the counter each morning and you're like, oh, I should make some toast for breakfast. So now that cue of the loaf of bread means make toast. But then you read a diet and nutrition book that convinces you that like grain and carbs are the devil, right? Well, now you go downstairs and you see that same loaf of bread and it means something totally new. Similar to you, like, oh, now the cigarette means I'm poisoning myself. Now it means, oh, I shouldn't eat that. That's bad for me. And it's really the story that you're telling, the thing that's happening in that second stage of the craving and the prediction about what it is, that changes your response. So to summarize, the reason I chose those 4 stages is that I was trying to create a model that I felt like accurately described both all of the robust research that is true about behavioral psychology and the research from cognitive psych and the influence of internal states. So my hope is that those 4 stages accurately describe a habit and how both the internal world and the external world influence our behaviors.